Tales from the Resting Titan. Something lives. Static. Written and read by Javon Joseph. They said Sophie was born wrong, not in ways you could fix with braces, medicine, or a good haircut. Though the orphanage matrons tried all three at different times. But wrong in ways a clock is wrong when it ticks at the wrong speed. Too slow sometimes, too fast others. Never in step with the rest of the room. She was pretty, which only made it worse. Large grey eyes, pale skin that seemed almost luminous in dim hallways. Hair the color of burnt honey that she kept hacked short with dull scissors because she couldn't stand the feeling of it brushing against the back of her neck. When she looked at you, she didn't quite meet your gaze. Her focus drifted elsewhere, just behind her shoulder, as if someone else stood there whispering things only she could hear. The other children at St. Bartholomew's orphanage call her Ghost Girl. The staff called her troubled. Sophie called it noise. It started as long as she could remember, though memory itself was fractured like a cracked mirror. A television would fuzz when she walked into the room. Radios dissolved into white hiss. Old fluorescent lights flickered and dimmed as she passed beneath them. At first, they blamed the wiring, then coincidence, then Sophie. Don't touch it, Sister Agnes snapped once, slapping Sophie's hand away from a portable radio. You'll break it. I didn't, Sophie murmured, her voice catching on certain sounds. The crash had done that. Words sometimes stalled halfway out of her mouth, like cars stuck in traffic. The crash. That was her first clear memory she ever had. Rain hammering against glass, her mother's voice saying something soft in the front seat. Her father laughing, a nervous laugh, tight around the edges. Then the sound. Metal folding like paper, glass exploding inward. A scream that cut off too sudden. After that, static. When Sophie was 6, a volunteer donated an old television to the girls' dormitory. The other children crowded around it every evening, watching cartoons that were years out of date, but to them, new. Sophie stayed in the corridor. The pictures wavered the moment she stepped in. Go away, one of the girls shouted. You're messing it up. The colors bled. The song stretched into a low, wobbling groan. Snow swallowed the screen. Sophie backed out. The picture snapped back instantly. That was the first time she realized it wasn't random. It was her. By 13, the mocking had turned sharper. Teenagers needed someone to carve their cruelty into, and Sophie was soft enough to cut. Say something, Goose Girl, they taunted. Tell us what the voices say. She didn't answer. Not because she didn't want it to, because she was listening. There were patterns in the static, not words exactly, more like impressions pressed in against her thoughts, like voices behind a wall. Sometimes she could almost make them out. Once, she heard her name. She told Sister Agnes. The nun's expression shifted from annoyance to something colder. You must not encourage these delusions, Sophie. I heard. You heard nothing. You imagine these things because you want attention. Sophie stopped trying after that. Especially, especially when she heard the noise. Except the noise kept growing. By 15, the orphanage refused to keep a television on if she was in the building. Radios were locked away. Even the maintenance man complained that equipment malfunctioned whenever she walked past. She's like a walking storm, he muttered, but not quite quietly enough. Sophie started spending more time alone in the basement of the laundry room. No electronics, no people, just the rhythmic thump of machines and the smell of detergent. It was quiet there until the day it wasn't. She was folding sheets when an old wall-mounted radio crackled to life behind her. It hadn't worked in years. A hiss filled the room, swelling until it pressed against her ears like deep water pressure. Sophie froze. Through the static came a sound, faint, distorted. A woman's voice. Sophie? Her heart lurched painfully. She knew that voice. Mom? The word broke apart as it left her mouth. Static surged, swallowing the signal. Then another voice, male, strained. Hold on! Hold on! The crash of sound, metal screaming, glass shattering. The radio died. Sophie collapsed to her knees, shaking so violently she couldn't breathe. They found her hours later, curled on the floor, whispering fragments of what she had heard. After that, everything happened so quickly. Doctors came, then more doctors, tests, questions, flashlights in her eyes. She's experiencing auditory hallucinations, one of them concluded. Trauma-induced psychosis is not uncommon. I heard them, Sophie insisted, clutching his sleeve. Before the crash, they were talking. He said, hold on. He said to hold on. Easy, Sophie, he said gently. No one is saying that you didn't believe you heard something. That word again. Believe. Not real. Not real? Not real? She started screaming at them, a raw animal song that didn't stop even when they sedated her. The mental hospital was quieter than the orphanage. Too quiet. No shouting children, no laughter. Just the soft hum of fluorescent lights and distant footsteps that never seemed to get closer. They gave Sophie a small room with padded corners and a narrow bed bolted to the floor. For weeks, there was nothing. No static, no voices, just silence. Silence so heavy it felt like being buried alive. She stopped speaking entirely. Then, one afternoon, a nurse brought her a small portable radio. For company, the woman said kindly. Music might help. Sophie stared at it as if it was a venomous snake. It's okay, the nurse assured her. Just a radio. The moment the door closed, Sophie reached for it with trembling hands. She turned the dial. Music flickered in and out. Then, static. Her breath caught. The air in the room seemed to thicken, pressing against her skin. A voice bled through. Sophie? Tears spilled down her face instantly. Mama? Rain, windshield wipers thudding, the hollow interior of a car. Her father's voice tight with fear. Road slick, I cannot. Her mother, slow down, slow down. A horn blaring. Sophie screams, stop, stop the car, please stop. The radio shrieked with feedback. Outside, alarm began to blare. Lights flickered violently along the corridor. In the other rooms, television burst into static simultaneously. Nurses shouted, equipment failed. Inside Sophie's room, the radio went silent. She clutched it to her chest, rocking back and forth, sobbing. They're stuck, she gasped. They're stuck inside there. They don't know what is going to happen. They do not know. Orderlies burst in, pinning her down as she struggled. See data. She's triggering another episode. Wholesale Sophie, 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 you are crazy. That word again. Her eyes snapped towards the corner of the room. A dead television mounted high on the wall crackled to life. Snow filled the screen. Shapes moved inside the static. Dozens of voices whispered at once. Urgent, desperate, overlapping. Sophie went very still. They're not gone, she whispered, her broken speech suddenly clear. They're just caught. The screen bulged outward slightly, as if something pressed from inside, from the other side. The lights exploded in a shower of sparks. Darkness swallowed the room. And in the silence that followed, only the radio remained alive. A faint hiss in the back. And from it, very softly, Sophie, can you hear us? Her lips trembled into a fragile, terrified smile. Yes, and somewhere in the hospital, every television turned on at once, and the static began to listen. Now, go to sleep if your mind will allow you.